The 2025 quarterback prospect model is finally here. You guys might know that we have a running back model, wide receiver model, and a tight end model where I went through all the 2025 prospects, all the 2026 prospects looking ahead to next year, and that's all available on our site, flockfantasy.com, promo code FSE. But I've spent the last few weeks building the quarterback version, and finally we have all four fantasy positions covered, and I think this is particularly relevant right now. Obviously, I would have wanted to get this done while rookie drafts were going on, but you still have time. This quarterback class was billed as a down class, and there's still time to see just how down it actually was. Maybe go trade or sell away some of these players. And number two, we got it in time for 2026's class, and there's a lot of unknowns in that one, and it's seemingly going to be really important to the strength of the 2026 picks because it's a down wide receiver class and a down tight end class. So this video is going to be three parts. Since this is a new prospect model, I am going to go over how I built the thing, timestamps in the description if you don't care. 2025 is the second part. I'm going to go over the 2025 class, and then looking ahead to 2026 is the third part, which will probably be the biggest part of the video. And again, scroll around using the timestamps. The ultimate goal, of course, on our quarterback picks is to hit, and quarterback picks in Superflex, which is what we primarily play on this channel, are very consequential to your dynasty roster. If you miss on quarterback, it hurts you big time. If you hit on quarterback, it helps you big time. So just like we did for the running backs, wide receiver, and tight end, we're going to go over the prospect model, how it was built. PPR fantasy production is the first thing that we're looking for in their first 4 years, years 1 to 4 of their NFL career. Generally, quarterbacks take a little bit of time to develop, so I stretched this beyond years 1 to 3 to years 1 to 4. And we also measured their productive value, or also their kind of value on the dynasty market, by where did they peak in keep, trade, cut market value. For running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, I did it after their rookie season. For quarterbacks, I'm doing it after their sophomore season because there's a lot of quarterback misses that spiked in value after their rookie season, like a Trey Lance or an Anthony Richardson, who never ended up really working out. Or I guess it's too early to say that for Richardson, but I don't think he'll end up working out. And then number two, there's also a lot of quarterbacks that missed their rookie seasons, like a JJ McCarthy, Penix types, Mahomes types, didn't really play a whole lot as rookies. So I wanted to do after their second season, because I think by the end of year 2, you probably have a better idea if this quarterback's going to hold down a starting job, if he's not going to hold down a starting job. So that's kind of why I changed it for the quarterback position as opposed to the tight end and running back and wide receiver position. Hitting on quarterbacks in Superflex leagues is super, super crucial because they are worth so much. Like, think about last year. If you drafted a couple of QBs from the 2024 class, you probably, increased the value of your dynasty roster by like a shit ton. If you took Bo Nix with an early second rounder, he's already now worth 2 to 3 first rounders. So this is a way that you can really accelerate a rebuilding team, where take your foundational quarterbacks, stack them up, and then maybe sell them off once you're looking for actual production. We can measure how predictive this model is by using R squared, which in simple terms basically just means how correlated it is to fantasy football success in terms of what their FSC grade was with how they produced in the NFL. 0.5527 to PPR points per game was the R squared there, and a staggering 0.69 to dynasty value after year 2, which was the highest of any position, which I'm really shocked about because generally I would say the NFL fantasy players, we're better at predicting wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends than we are at predicting quarterbacks. But it's interesting that this model is actually, proving to be one of the more successful ways of predicting the quarterback position. And when you look at what that was relative to draft capital, the R squared of the FSE model to predicting point production, PPR points per game years 1 to 4, was 13.7% higher than draft capital was, and 25.4% higher than draft capital was at predicting peak, keep, trade, cut value 2 years down the road. We all know the NFL is brutal at evaluating quarterbacks. So much depends on where they go, who's coaching them, who's blocking for them, what weapons they have, who the owner of the franchise is. Keep in mind that the 2024 quarterbacks don't yet qualify for peak, keep, trade, cut value because they have not played 2 years in the NFL yet. And 2022 to 2024 quarterbacks don't qualify for PPR points per game because they haven't played 4 years in the NFL yet. So we're basically just looking at a sample of 2016 to 2021 for PPR points per game, and then also 2022 and 2023 for peak, keep, trade, cut value. Here's a brief rundown of how the model works. These are the model inputs. You guys can see them on the screen. Again, quarterbacks are challenging. The longest, most time-consuming part of this was not collecting data because there's a lot less drafted quarterbacks every year than there are running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. The thing that took me the longest was figuring out what metrics were actually effective at predicting fantasy production, because we don't have a lot of sticky metrics at the quarterback position like we do for, weight adjusted speed score is a good metric for running backs. RAS score is a good metric for running backs. Yards per route run, good metric for wide receivers and tight ends. We don't have a whole lot of metrics that are predictive naturally, and I found a lot of them by testing hundreds pretty much at the quarterback position. And from there, you filter out the hits of the group, you make trend lines, grade all the prospects out of 100%, FSC total grade, based on all of these inputs here. And I'm going to go through basically the 3 top graded players in the model to showcase exactly how everybody was graded. So to give you an example of how a trend line is made for how I grade these players, if we take adjusted yards per attempt as one of the metrics, so yards per attempt and then factoring in drops and that kind of thing, for quarterbacks who posted an 18 point per game season, which is basically a high-end QB1 season, a top 10 quarterback season, and that number was 9.1 on average. And the keep trade cut they peaked as a quarterback 1 post year 2 of their career, 9.3. So generally speaking, the mark here is about 9.1 to 9.3. You can use those numbers as like the bell curve in grading, generally around the 70th percentile is like a pass fail. And then you'd get the full 1.5% specifically. That's how much that metric was worth if you went over 10 adjusted yards per attempt. And that's how you ended up kind of grading on every individual metric. And then that overall grade was out of 100%. So the 3 best quarterbacks in the history of the model since 2016 are Jayden Daniels, Joe Burrow, and Kyler Murray. Yes, Jayden Daniels, even though last year's film grades, I had Caleb Williams ranked higher, I had Drake May ranked higher, I even had Bo Nix ranked higher on film. Even despite that input in the model, Jayden Daniels still ranked as the best quarterback in the history of the model and would have been the quarterback 1 in the 2024 class. So I kind of wish I would have had this thing last year, because Jayden Daniels is now a top 3 startup pick. At the top of the model, you guys can see all of the metrics, how they were graded. For example, in the decision-making category, you see pressure to sack rate, you see sack rate overall, you see turnover-worthy play rate, you see career low bust percentage according to Sports Info Solutions, you see sacks plus turnovers per dropback. So there's a number of different metrics that I factored in. Same with basic efficiency. You can see adjusted yards per attempt, career passer rating, touchdown to INT ratio, PPR points per game proved to be the most effective metric period outside of draft capital. It was the most effective at predicting fantasy production, just raw PPR points per game that you had in your best season in college. So, I mean, naturally, if you were productive in college for a fantasy perspective, you'd be productive in the NFL from a fantasy perspective. Those were some of the analytics markers that made up 35% of the total grade. For the other positions, you guys might remember that I also added in like accelerators for if they had good quarterback play, if they had high target competition, if they had improvement bonuses throughout their college career. I tinkered with that stuff for the quarterback position. It just did not end up correlating at all. So I did not include it for this position group. It was way more important for running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. You guys might notice that there's also this archetype column that I didn't have for the other positions that says either Konami mobile or pocket passer. Basically, all this is taking their mobility grade, which is 8% mark of their 25% traits grade. If you got 6% or higher in the mobility grade, you would get a Konami archetype. If you got 3% to 5%, you got a mobile tag. And if you got sub 3%, then you're a pocket passer. And this just kind of indicates what the fantasy ceiling is, because of course we know that Konami code and mobile quarterbacks are usually more valuable for fantasy than pocket passers, just because they can run the football and that gives us more fantasy production. And then again, you can see some of the other traits, arm talent, accuracy, so on and so forth, all that in-game stuff, big time throw rate divided by turnover worthy play rate, adjusted completion percentage. Again, I tested so many things. These were the ones that ended up being more predictive. So that's the analytics, the traits grades. The film grades was also one of those factors, and it was actually the biggest input in the entire model of 40%. And draft capital was 30% of that 40%, because obviously when you're starting in the NFL, you need draft capital to be able to hold down a starting job, generally speaking, to get a crack at starting, to be a franchise gets more patient with you the higher you were drafted, that kind of thing. So the overall film grades, you guys can see how those were made up. Again, it was NFL.com grade or my film grade if I graded them. Those were 2% each, and I only used one or the other depending on if I graded them or not. And then it was a consensus big board, which was a collection of PFF big board and NFL mock draft database, and then their actual draft capital. All that culminates in their FSC grade. And then you have the prospect buckets here. You could either be a generational prospect, a foundational prospect, boom or bust, quarterback 2 upside, waiver wire, or fodder. Those were the prospect buckets that everybody fell into. For expected dynasty value, you guys can see what the hit rates were there. Again, generally the biggest drop-off occurred if you were not a boomer bust prospect and instead fell into the QB2 upside prospect territory. And the big difference between foundational and boomer bust was generally just the floor was higher with foundational prospects versus boomer bust guys. They actually produced more like elite guys, like boomer bust prospects like Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, for example, were like huge booms when they hit. But you also had big time misses in that territory as well. So similar to the other models, I also kind of detailed what you should do with them in rookie drafts in that rookie draft tier column there. Godfather, smash, bust potential, all those labels. Basically, all it means is, especially more than any other position in Superflex, quarterbacks with draft capital are going to go high in rookie drafts. So if the label says Godfather, you should be taking them. If the label says Smash, you should be taking them where they generally go. But if the label says Landmine, you're probably going to want to avoid that player. So here's 4 different top 10 selected quarterbacks: Daniels, Lawrence, Richardson, and Daniel Jones, all selected top 10 draft capital, but very different prospect grades based on the FSE model. And you can see that you should have been taking Jaden Daniels at value. And again, I wish I had this thing last year. Trevor Lawrence, you should have been taking at value. Again, he was the 101 in his class, so you were just drafting him, period. Anthony Richardson, you maybe should have been a little bit wary of. And Daniel Jones, you definitely should have been a little bit wary of, although generally speaking, I think he's worked out relative to his grade. So, like I said, those are the prospect buckets. Those are the rookie draft tiers. Those are the archetypes. Everything you guys should kind of understand how this thing works by now. Now we're going to compare prospect profiles to other prospects that we've seen. And we're going to start with the 2025 class because I have not done this for the 2025 class yet. And then we're going to do the 2026 class. So 2025 class as a whole was considered a down prospect class. There are no generational prospects. There was only one foundational prospect, and he was barely a foundational prospect, and that was Cam Ward. He was the only foundational prospect of the class. Foundational quarterbacks hit about 2/3 of the time, give or take. Peak as QB1 in Dynasty value after year 2, about 75% of the time. So generally, they're pretty high floor picks. You could see some of the guys there, Bryce Young, Jared Goff, they held their value pretty decently, but you don't necessarily get those boom quarterbacks like, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, guys who go a little bit lower. Generally speaking, Cam Ward, I would say, wouldn't have scored this high if I had to guess. I thought he would have been more in the boomer bust territory, but the fact that he does sneak into the foundational tier is actually very good, because when you look at Cam Ward's college numbers, he ended up having a very good season, 39 touchdowns this past year, and goes first overall in the NFL draft. The question I would say post-draft for Cam Ward is, how good is the Tennessee landing spot? We don't know really what to expect from the coaching staff. We don't know what to expect from the weapons. The protection's kind of suboptimal as well. It's not like he went to an elite situation the way that we thought Caleb Williams went to last year, and what it turned out Jaden Daniels was able to elevate the Commanders into last year as well. So Cam Ward, I would say generally speaking, scored pretty well. Best comparables to Zach Wilson, Bryce Young, Jared Goff. I would say he's probably more Zach Wilson than any of those other guys, just because Zach Wilson was a little bit boomer bust, but he was actually considered a better kind of boomer bust type of prospect there. But the analytics grade is actually most in line with Bryce Young, even though the size discrepancy of those two guys don't really make them comparable prospects. But I think play style wise and the caliber of prospect first overall pick we're talking about here, Jared Goff, Bryce Young, makes some sense. QB2 in this class was Jaxson Dart, both in the real life NFL draft and also in the NFL or the FSE prospect model here. He is the only boomer bust caliber prospect in this class. Now again, boomer bust prospects hit at about a 60% rate. 45% of them peaked as top 5 dynasty quarterbacks. So you're talking when they hit, they usually hit big. Jaxson Dart lands in this boomer bust territory alongside Michael Penix, Dwayne Haskins, Lamar Jackson. Again, I wouldn't overreact. That Lamar Jackson is technically his best comp analytically, film traits wise, and overall grade. But it is worth noting that Lamar Jackson picked near the end of the first round for some concerns. He needed some development, and Jaxson Dart kind of the same thing. He's somewhere between Danny Dimes, Michael Penix, Dwayne Haskins, and Lamar Jackson. Again, not play style wise, but he is definitely comparable as a prospect. He's got work to do, but goes to a situation where he has a clear number 1 alpha wide receiver. I think Brian Daboll is a good coach, assuming he sticks around there. Very promising for Jaxson Dart. And I would say this makes me generally a little bit higher on Jaxson Dart. than I would have been otherwise, because I wouldn't have actually quite expected him to score this well. But he did have a good analytical grade. And you guys can see there, of the comps that he has, him and Lamar Jackson and Dwayne Haskins all graded out pretty good analytically. And that's, bullish for Jaxson Dart. So if you drafted him, early second round, end of the first round, maybe you still have a chance to go trade for him, I would say he's generally a decent bet to make given where you're getting him at cost right now. I did have him QB3, on film, just behind Jalen Milroe in my pre-draft film grades, but I did actually have him ahead of Shough before all the debacle of him going, in the 5th round or whatever. So definitely an interesting thing for Jaxson Dart. Dillon Gabriel is quarterback 3 in the model. So that's probably the first surprise so far. First of the 5 quarterbacks that are in this QB2 upside tier. So there's 5 guys in this tier. Dillon Gabriel just happens to be at the top of it. About a 1 in 4 chance that you hit on a quarterback from here. So generally speaking, not a good hit rate. You're going to miss 3 out of every 4 times you swing on a quarterback in this territory. It's the same chance for a QB1 or QB2 producer. So usually when you hit, it's Dak Prescott, it's Brock Purdy, usually generally hit, hold down a starting job. But when you hit, it could look like Sam Howell as well, who we saw have one good season and then not really be much after that. But he is still young, and I still believe in Sam Howell to some degree. But both Browns quarterbacks here are QB3 and 4. Dillon Gabriel, his profile is actually better. So if you're thinking, Dillon Gabriel ranks ahead of Shough Sanders because he went on day 2 and Shough went on day 3, even if you exclude the fact that Dillon Gabriel went on day 2, Shough Sanders actually would still rank behind him even without the draft capital input. So I think people forget that Dillon Gabriel was actually really, really good as a young player at UCF before transferring to Oklahoma, and then obviously transfers to Oregon for his final year. I do think that Sam Howell is not a terrible comp for Dillon Gabriel. If you squint hard, you got to squint hard. It does actually not look that dissimilar from Brock Purdy either. Good news is Dillon Gabriel's free. So he's QB3 in the model, and you can get him for nothing. He's probably available on waiver wires in Dynasty leagues right now, 4th round rookie picks, throw him into the end of a trade, tack him on as a throw-in or whatever. He's not a terrible option if you guys want to go trade for him, because think about it. The Browns have and a lot invested in Dillon Gabriel, more invested than any other quarterback that's on their roster right now, even though Shough is the big media name that gets all the hype. He has the most invested into him, and also there is a wide open quarterback competition that if he just looks the best, he could end up starting some games for Cleveland, and he actually has some decent draft capital to be able to hold some value. We'll have to wait and see. QB4 in the model is Shough Sanders, who's of course going to be competing with Dillon Gabriel for playing time, starting opportunities. Shough, without the fact that he fell to round 5, is not a first-round quarterback prospect. So again, even if you take out the fact that he fell to round 5, he is still more comparable to like a Drew Lock, a Cody Kessler, a Spencer Rattler, a Sam Ehlinger caliber prospect. It's not like you take out that 5th-round draft capital and he's Bryce Young. Like, he was not that good of a prospect. I had him grade as a 3rd-round grade before the draft. People constantly freaked out going, dude, this guy was a 1st-round lock and he slid to round 5. I mean, he was a 1st-round media darling. I don't think he was actually expected to go in the 1st round by the NFL. He has solid analytics traits. He has solid traits on film in terms of his grade there. But the flaws that he did have were a lot of character stuff that people seemingly, maybe it was true, maybe it wasn't. And he fell to the 5th round. And now he doesn't necessarily have that safety net of, this guy's going to start a lot of games because he was a high draft pick. So Shough Sanders' best comparable is probably Spencer Rattler, and I think that's a half-decent comparison for him in terms of the type of leash he would get in terms of if he was starting. Like, we saw Rattler get a little bit of run as a starter last year, and then now he's going to have to compete for the starting job with Tyler Shough, and I would imagine both guys get maybe replaced by a 1st overall or 1st-round quarterback next year. So Shough Sanders, don't go overboard with him. Don't draft him in the early 3rd round, late 2nd round of a rookie draft. If you have him, probably sell him on name value and go after somebody that's a lot cheaper. Use him to tier up, whatever the case may be. Jalen Milroe is QB5 in the model. He was actually my QB2 on film going into the NFL draft. I would say he's semi-overrated as a prospect, given that he ranks around guys like Deshaun Kaiser, Desmond Ridder, Spencer Rattler, Kellen Mond, and Malik Willis. However, the upside of Jalen Milroe, as we know, is an exceptional fantasy quarterback, because not only is he a Konami rusher, he's probably one of the few guys that broke the rushing model in terms of mobility and rated even, I think it's out of 8%. I think he had a higher grade than 8% because there's actually bonuses if you just absolutely demolish some of the metrics, and Jalen Milroe demolished some of the metrics, much like Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, and Jalen Hurts did. So Jalen Milroe is an exceptional rusher, and if he gets a chance to start, he is going to be an absolute smash from a fantasy perspective. And if you drafted him mid to late second round, where I was comfortable drafting him, he absolutely could end up paying off big time dividends there. But the model does say it's probably more likely he misses than hits. But I will take a 20% chance at a top 10 dynasty quarterback any day of the week in the mid to late second round. So again, he's somewhere between Jalen Hurts or Malik Willis. Sounds like he's closer to Malik Willis at the moment, but it is not insanely off to say that he could be the next Jalen Hurts. He was a big target of mine in trades when he slid in rookie drafts, and I would still highly suggest that Sam Darnold doesn't scare me. I think he's a half-decent option. Post year one, maybe he loses a lot of value. Go trade for him then. I wouldn't necessarily pay what he's going to go for now. If you miss the boat, you miss the boat. But mid-season, if Darnold looks good, Darnold is starting games, you could probably get Jalen Milroe for absolutely nothing, and that's when I would probably be willing to trade for him. So QB6 in the class, Tyler Shough, who was, I believe, the third quarterback off the board in terms of overall draft capital. He went 40th overall to the Saints. So Shough profiles very similarly to Will Levis. It's actually really, really almost identical how close he is to Will Levis of a prospect. Levis got a chance to start. Levis actually had a half decent amount of dynasty value because he was a starter and because he was a young quarterback who maybe had pass volume on his side last offseason. But that's basically where we're at with Shough right now. Derek Carr retires. It's going to be Rattler versus Shough in camp. And whoever wins that battle, if it's, winning, will probably only win like 3-4 games with this roster on New Orleans. So I would imagine a lot of people are going to elevate Shough just because he's going to play games and just because he's going to start games. And I would use that to tier up. I would use that to sell him because I think inevitably the value of whoever starts for this team, whether it's Rattler or Shough, is going to flicker out the second April of next year hits because they're going to draft a quarterback first overall, top 5, wherever they end up picking. So Tyler Shough, if people are going to be sold on the fact that he's going to start games, I would probably sell him. He wasn't a good prospect. He was overdrafted, and he profiles kind of like a Will Levis, a Clayton Tune, a Deshaun Kaiser, and a Malik Willis there. So I wouldn't be investing too much in him because he does go late second, early third of rookie drafts because of the fact that people know he's going to start games. So QB7, closing out this tier, and probably the best value of this tier for sure, is Will Howard. And I mean, this ought to excite Steelers fans seeing some of these comps. Keep in mind that the QB2 upside tier, these are like the 2 best players to ever come from it. Dak Prescott and Brock Purdy, of like the 20 players that come from this tier, they are like easily the biggest hits. But it is worth noting that Will Howard does profile most similarly to one Brock Purdy. And if you think about it, Aaron Rodgers is going to start most of the year. Aaron Rodgers going to maybe teach Will Howard a thing or two. He's going to be a UDFA for a lot of people in rookie drafts, going to be a 4th-round pick at the very earliest. You can tack him on to the end of trades, buy him for nothing midseason when Aaron Rodgers is starting games. Will Howard, not a terrible option to go after. Now, we're going to speed through the rest of this because nobody really cares about these quarterbacks. Waiver wire QBs, 6% chance at a QB2, 4% chance they peak as a QB2 in market value. Curtis Rourke of Indiana now going to the San Francisco 49ers, Kyle McCord going to the Eagles, Graham Mertz going to the Texans, Riley Leonard going to the Colts, and Quinn Ewers going to the Dolphins. None of these guys really have a path to start games outside of injury. Like if Tua Tagovailoa gets injured, Quinn Ewers and Zach Wilson would battle it out to start games for the Miami Dolphins. If for some reason the Colts quarterbacks are terrible, maybe Riley Leonard would get some run at that point. But McCord, unless Jalen Hurts goes down, he ain't starting games. Unless Purdy goes down, Curtis Rourke ain't starting games. And Graham Mertz, unless CJ Stroud is going down, he ain't starting games. So I would say none of these guys are really interesting, but I would say the most interesting is Quinn Ewers because he has arm talent and an injury-prone quarterback ahead of him. So that would be the end of the 2025 class. If you guys can see in totality what it looks like, you got 1 foundational quarterback, 1 boomer bust quarterback, 5 QB2 upside, and then a bunch of waiver wire guys. The best comparable class to give you guys a range of outcomes for this class in general is 2019's, where Kyler Murray was a better QB1 than Cam Ward is. But aside from that, it's almost an identical makeup. Dwayne Haskins to Jaxson Dart, DJ, Drew Lock, Will Greer, Tracy McSorley, all compared to those like Shough, Milroe, Shadur Sanders, Dylan Gabriel guys, except probably with a little bit better draft capital. And generally speaking, that was not considered a great quarterback class. So I think we were, justified in saying that the 2025 class was kind of middling. It wasn't exceptional. It wasn't terrible. You had Cam Ward go first overall. You had Jaxson Dart sneak into the first round. But generally speaking, it was not considered a great quarterback class. And it was definitely not as good as 2024's, definitely not as good as 2023's, definitely not as good as 2020's or 2021's or 2018's. So there was a number of, I would say generally it was a below average quarterback class in the history of the model. 2026 prospects. Now, if you skipped ahead to this part because you don't really care about the process, you didn't care about the 2025 class, keep in mind it is still very, very early. There is a full another year of college football, maybe multiple years of college football if these guys don't come out for the 2026 class. And draft capital specifically is going to fluctuate based on who's playing well and what happens January to April of next year. All of these numbers, all of the projections are all projections. They're all things that we're trying to look ahead to a year away. But as of this moment, it's going to change a lot when we actually get to the 2026 quarterback targets and avoid post NFL draft in May of next year, when it's going to be a lot more accurate at that point in time. As I did for the running backs, for the wide receivers and the tight ends, which you can check out because we have the 2026 running backs, 2026 wide receivers, and 2026 tight ends. All you can see how good those classes are expected to be. I gave the prospects entering their junior or their redshirt sophomore year, meaning their third year of college football, a booster because they're not going to have that good of production relative to a guy who's been in college for 5 or 6 years and is a super senior coming out this season. So 90 over 100 boost is what year 3 college football players got. Year 4 college football players, so true seniors or redshirt juniors, would get a 95 out of 100 boost to balance that playing field between those year 5, year 6, year 7 prospects and the year 3 and year 4 prospects. And we got to project a little bit more improvement when you're 19, 20 years old, as opposed to when you're 22, 23, 24 years old. So best quarterbacks in the 2026 class. It's a group of 5 guys in the boomer bust tier. And these prospects, I will say, I expect 2 of them to go back to school. Specifically, Arch Manning and LaNorris Sellers, if I had to guess. But I would say just law of averages, 2 of these guys probably go back to school. So it's probably going to be more like a big 3 as opposed to a big 5. But there is the upside that if these guys all ball out, then we actually have a really good quarterback class on our hands. But that's like the really high-end range of outcomes that if all these guys play well, we have 4 or 5 first-round quarterbacks next year. That would be unlikely given their current profiles. QB1 in the class is Texas quarterback Arch Manning. Now, you'd be shocked by that because he did not play a whole lot of college football so far, but he is projected to be a top 3 NFL draft pick. And I would say if he's in this class, he'll probably be the first overall pick, given the name pedigree and what he actually does have in terms of numbers and film and that kind of stuff. There's not a lot to go off of because he started like 7 or 8 games in his entire career, but 6.4% big time throw percentage, 76.5% adjusted completion percentage, 88.5 PFF grade, 10.4 yards per pass attempt, and a 9-2 touchdown to interception ratio. You'd think with the last name Manning that he can't run the football. And he is technically a pocket passer by his archetype, but 7 yards per carry, 81.1 PFF rushing grade. He just doesn't have a lot of rushing attempts. He's going to be a mobile quarterback prospect once he starts a full season. The question that everybody's probably asking, is he in this class? If I had to guess as a Longhorns fan and also just what I would expect out of this profile, I don't think he's going to be. I think he's going to be in 2027's class, which is going to make that class exceptionally high end. But unless he has a monster year and the NFL, commission tells him, yeah, dude, you're going to be the first pick in the draft, he still might not come out because he's in the luxury position of knowing that he'll probably be the first pick the year after anyways because of the name cachet and what kind of season, let's say, he has in 2026, going to a big school, throwing a good weapons and that kind of thing. He might just look and be like, the New Orleans Saints are picking first. I'm going back to school because my dad or my grandpa played for the New Orleans Saints and they sucked. So I'm going to move on to a different team. And this family has done this before. So it's very possible that he could not be in this class because A, he doesn't like who's picking first, and B, because he just wants another year of experience, wants to be a 2-year starter instead of a 1-year starter. And the NFL would probably appreciate that about him as well. So I would say if you're trading for 2026 picks, because best case scenario, he is in the class and you got a better pick because of it. And worst case scenario, he's not in the class and you adjusted your expectations, because whatever your expectations are for the 2026 class in totality, and I would say generally they should be kind of on the lower end of things, anything that comes out of nowhere is just going to be gravy for you. And Arch Manning to me is the gravy on top of this class. If he is in it, he is going to be the 101 and he is going to end up being a very high-end dynasty quarterback asset. Probably, like if I had to rank Arch Manning the quarterback asset right now, even knowing he might be in the 2027 class, I would say he's probably in line with Bo Nix and CJ Stroud in terms of what kind of trade value he would be worth to very sharp dynasty league who knows their shit, who plays in a Devy league or whatever. That is probably how he would be valued right this second. And that's after a great season, he would probably skyrocket up to a top 5 to 10 dynasty quarterback, no problem. So Arch Manning, what ends up happening with him is going to determine the strength of this class for sure. Let's talk about who's currently the quarterback 1 in the class. based on who's probably going to be in it, and also the quarterback 2 in the model, and that's Cade Klubnik of the Clemson Tigers, entering his senior year as a third-year starter. So a lot of data behind Cade Klubnik, unlike Arch Manning, who's only started a couple of games. We have a lot more to go off of. 87.7 PFF passing grade, former 5-star recruit from Westlake High School in Austin, Texas, where Drew Brees and Nick Foles both went. So a lot of pedigree coming out of high school, and we saw him put it all together in college last year when he had by far his best season of his college career. As a second-year starter, he was second in college football with 43 total touchdowns, 36-6 touchdown to interception ratio as a passer. Good metrics across the board. If he can maintain that level of play and then even elevate it a little bit more, he'll be the first pick in the draft, assuming Arch isn't in the draft. And he needs to stretch the field more. He needs to get a little bit more accurate, but he's a decent runner. He has the pedigree of the high school quarterback who was very, very talented. And his best comps are like J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix, Trey Lance. That's pretty decent for a guy who's probably going to end up being one of the top quarterbacks in this class. And again, keep in mind, because he's a year 4 player entering the year, these are mainly just treating his numbers almost verbatim as if he was draft eligible this season. So after another good year of college football, who knows, man? He could have a nice meteoric rise to a top 5 lock and end up being the 101 in 2026 rookie drafts. And it wouldn't shock me if he ends up doing it, because I do think generally Jeremiah Love is treated as the 101 right now, but I tend to think whoever quarterback 1 is becomes the 101, whether it's Arch Manning or Cade Klubnik or some of these other guys I'm going to talk about. I think 101 will end up being a quarterback. It'll just depend on who. QB3 is LaNorris Sellers. South Carolina's LaNorris Sellers. I do think people in the Devy streets specifically are a little bit too high on LaNorris Sellers, because his passing numbers for a 3-star quarterback who was a first-year starter as a true sophomore are pretty good. 18-7 touchdown to interception ratio, 8.4 yards per attempt, 4.9% big time throw rate. If you watch him on film, which I haven't really done film research on a lot of these guys, he has a lot of wow plays. He is a big, exceptional athlete at 6'3", 240 pounds. 4.6 turnover-worthy play rates, though, really bad. That he's got to clean that up. He took a lot of sacks as well. A lot of pressure resulted in sacks, but like a 20% pressure to sack rate. So this is a dude that needs to clean up the mistakes. This is a dude that needs to develop as a player. And a lot of people are looking at LaNorris Sellers right now and going, well, if Anthony Richardson went in the top 5, he should go in the top 5. However, the NFL just took Jalen Milroe in the 3rd round because of that same principle. It's like, well, I thought Jalen Milroe was just as good of a prospect as Anthony Richardson, and he didn't go in the top 5. It's because the NFL learned that, hey, maybe we should let these guys marinate a little bit. And I do tend to think that LaNorris Sellers will not be in the 2026 class. He'll come out in 2027 because he's still a little bit raw. If he has a big year this year, of course, anything can happen. I do kind of think it'll be more of the same 2025 college football season as it was 2024. And then 2027 class would be that big time jump for LaNorris Sellers. But we'll have to wait and see. If he has a big season, he will be a very, very high-end quarterback prospect in the class, especially with that 852 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns that he added on the ground. He has dual threat ability. I would say best case scenario we're looking at, I'm not going to call him Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, or Kyler Murray, but could he be a Jalen Hurts? Could he be somebody like that? It's possible if he ends up taking a big leap, taking a big step there. So let's talk about a guy who, like Cade Klubnik, I do expect to be in the class and competing for quarterback 1. That's Drew Allar from the Penn State Nittany Lions. Both Klubnik and Allar were the top 2 rated recruits in their respective high school classes. Allar was number 1. Klubnik was number 2. Allar projects very similarly to some of the other kind of game manager-y quarterbacks like J.J. McCarthy and Justin Herbert. And you guys might hear that and go, Justin Herbert, he was a game manager in college. That's how he played. Also, with Drew Allar, it's important to know that he has gotten better every single year, and he is exceptionally young for a senior entering the year. He is 21 years old as a senior, and he's already started 2 college football seasons for a Big Ten program, playing in big games, playing in college football playoff games, and he's entering year 4 of his college career with 3 years now, entering his 3rd year of starting. So 8.4 yards per attempt, 24-8 touchdown interception ratio this past year, 25-2 in 2023. So over the last 2 seasons, 49 touchdowns through the air and 10 interceptions. So that's very, very solid numbers. At 19 years old last year, he led one of the best college football teams in the country. The arm was heralded as Josh Allen 2.0 when he was coming out of high school, and he could scoot a little bit. 5.2 yards per carry last year, 5.1 the year before that, rushing for 300 plus yards in 2023 and 419 yards last year as the starter. The issue with Drew Allar is, and I actually just drafted him in our Devy draft at 210. So I generally believe in Drew Allar to take another step forward because the pedigree's there, the numbers are there. He plays for a big school. I think post college football season, depending on the season he had, the scouts are really going to like him in the Senior Bowl, in the combine process. The problem, though, is that he has Nick Singleton and Katron Allen in the backfield with him, who are going to be the engine of this offense. Penn State will run it down everybody's throat, and we're going to look at the film, and we're going to have to J.J. McCarthy our way into a quarterback prospect. We're going to have to Justin Herbert our way into a quarterback prospect because he probably won't have 40 touchdowns this year. He probably won't have 4,000 passing yards this year. They like to run the ball. They're probably going to have him be efficient, move the chains, don't turn the ball over. But let's see a jump from Drew Allar. Play good in the big games, maybe up the numbers a little bit, and he could be QB1 in this year's class. And I would say, generally, it will probably be him or Klubnik who ends up being QB1, in my opinion, given the profiles that we currently have, assuming Arch and Sellers are probably in 2027's class. But we got some names here, man. It's not a completely desolate group of quarterbacks. Let's talk about quarterback 5 and the last guy in this tier. Boomer bust caliber prospects, again, hit at about a 60-ish% rate. So we're talking about if all 5 of them are in the class, maybe 2 or 3 of these guys end up hitting based on historical hit rates. Garrett Nussmeier, quarterback of LSU, 1-year starter in 4 years of college play so far. Not great. Entering year 5 of his college career, people are expecting a big jump out of Garrett Nussmeier because he had a pretty good season last year, and I would say it's a good thing he didn't come out because he would have been a 1-year starter and there'd be red flags all over his profile. He does not run the ball at all. 93 rushing yards last year. So this is a pure, tried and true pocket passer like a Dwayne Haskins or a Josh Rosen. Those are his best comps according to the model here. It's funny that Josh Allen's one of his comps as well, but obviously Josh Allen runs the ball a lot more than what Garrett Nussmeier is going to do. Here's the thing, though. In LSU's offense this year, Nick Anderson comes in from Oklahoma, exceptionally talented freshman season at Oklahoma, and then he got injured last year. I think he's going to end up being one of the best receivers in the 2026 class. He comes in, that's a great weapon to throw to. Berrien Brown from Kentucky, very productive, redshirt senior. He comes in to help move the chains, and Aaron Anderson, who was already there. Garrett's got a couple of good weapons to throw the football to, so the ceiling here is probably that he has like a Michael Penix type of season, or maybe what we thought Carson Beck was going to do coming into the year last year, and maybe he's a Jared Goff level prospect, and he goes top 5 in the NFL draft. I would say generally, though, think of the downside risk for Nussmeier's case, because he's only been good for 1 year, and the floor is like Will Grier or Stetson Bennett or somebody who's kind of more of a game managery type of quarterback and doesn't end up, becoming one of these top end dudes who goes in the first round. So that's the issue with Garrett Nussmeier. If you guys are in Devy drafts right now, I would maybe let your league mates draft him. It's not that he's a bad prospect by any means. It's just that, like, if he doesn't smash this year and have 45 touchdowns, he might not be necessarily the greatest quarterback prospect in the book. But if he does and runs a little bit more, people are going to make Burrow comparisons. Like, it could happen because he's got really, really good weapons to throw to, and I think Nick Anderson's going to end up being a smash for them at LSU this year. So 2026 prospects that are quarterback 2 upside. So those were the top 5 guys, all boomer bust prospects. No foundational, no generational prospects as of now. QB2 upside prospects, I would say if any of these non-top 5 become QB1 off the board in the NFL draft, it's probably one of these 3 quarterbacks. Sam Leavitt of Arizona State, Fernando Mendoza, formerly of Cal, now of Indiana, and John Mateer, formerly of Washington State, now of Oklahoma. With Sam Leavitt, and best comparable for him is like Kenny Pickett, Daniel Jones type. Not great, but he was a redshirt freshman last year, and he led his team to the college football playoffs, a team that almost beat Texas, due in part to his running back, Cam Scadaboo, having a great game. 24-6 touchdown to interception ratio last year, and he was 19 most of the year. So he's a really young player. 8.1 yards per attempt, 500 yards rushing, 5 touchdowns, 6'2", 210 pounds, so decent size there. The tools aren't like exceptional, but could he be like a Bo Nix caliber prospect? Could he be like a Jaxson Dart caliber prospect with another really good year? I do think that's definitely possible for Sam Leavitt of Arizona State. And again, I would say there's a chance he's in the 2027 class given that he's so young, but it is possible he has another great year this year and he chains together a first-round profile. So Fernando Mendoza, I will say, the title of this video is Quarterbacks to Target and Avoid. I don't know why he's expected to be a first-round pick. I don't get it. Formerly of Cal, now of the Indiana Hoosiers. Not a numbers darling by any means, but he is 6'5", 225 pounds. Did pass for a 16-6 touchdown interception ratio. I really do not see it
With Fernando Mendonza, I have not watched the film. Maybe he's just the best guy on film of all time. And Cal was kind of a dumpster fire last year, so maybe he was the lone bright spot. But 334 rushing yards and middling PFF grades, it's just not getting me there. I really don't get why he's expected to be a top 10 pick right now. Maybe he's more of a second or a third round quarterback. This is why I don't put too much stock into draft capital at this moment in time, and I like to look at the profile in totality. But we'll see what happens this year as a Hoosier. I mean, Curtis Rourke had a really efficient year at Indiana last year. If you look at his FSC grade without draft capital included, because it's projected draft capital, it is way worse than Leavitt's and Mateer's, who are also in this tier. So he is being really, really elevated by the fact that he's expected to go as a top 10 pick in the NFL draft, which I just frankly don't buy. So Fernando Mendonza, if you guys are seeing mocks of him going high, don't waste your Devy picks on him. I would say he's probably overvalued for that reason. Let's talk about John Mateer, formerly of Washington State, now of Oklahoma. This is my guy. So much so that in our Devy draft right now, Carbonator sniped me on him. And when we do a top 24 tier list, he will be a lot higher than QB8. I can promise you that. It's lazy because he's about to go to Oklahoma. But man, does this guy remind me of Baker Mayfield. He looks a lot like Baker Mayfield, and he kind of has a little bit of Bo Nix, Kyler Murray to his game as well, where he has arm angles that he can take that are off platform. He has the bravado and the moxie of all these QB prospects that I fall for. Like if you guys go back and look at all the QB prospects that I love, they're always these hyper confident, 6'2", 210-pound dudes that can scoot a little bit. You think of Sam Howell, you think of Zach Wilson, you think of Bo Nix, you think of Baker Mayfield. John Mateer's cut from the same cloth of all of those guys, in my opinion. But here's the thing. He had really good production last year. 29 passing touchdowns, 15 rushing touchdowns, and that quarterback that I said Cade Klubnik was second in total touchdowns in college football to last year, it was John Mateer. John Mateer led college football in total touchdowns last year, and he rushed for 1,000 rushing yards and 15 touchdowns at 6.8 yards per carry. So the guy can run, man. If you watch the tape, he is not Baker Mayfield as an athlete, man. He's a better athlete than Baker, that's for sure. And he is a Konami code quarterback. This is my number one Devy target quarterback at cost right now, because Arch you got to pay up for, Sellers you got to pay up for. I mean, Allar usually you have to pay up for. I actually, like I said, I drafted him and I got him at a decent discount. But I would say at cost right now, John Mateer is my number one Devy quarterback target because so much so, like I said, that people in our league knew I wanted him and, picked him right ahead of me. So John Mateer, because of the rushing upside, I do think he has a chance to be QB1 from a dynasty perspective, from a fantasy perspective. So very excited to see what he does at Oklahoma this year. I actually laid down some coin that he might win the Heisman. Oklahoma could be a dumpster fire. I understand that, but I think Mateer could be different, man. I think he could elevate the play of those around him. I really wish Nick Anderson had stayed at Oklahoma, though, for the sake of John Mateer going there. So, waiver wire guys. These guys, I wouldn't expect too much out of them, and also I think some of them will go back to school, specifically the first guy that I'm going to talk about. But we have some interesting names here. Quarterback 9 through 11 in the model. Nico Iamaleava, I think that's how you say his name. Obviously, the whole debacle of him going from Tennessee to UCLA was to NIL money and all that kind of stuff. But Nico is huge, man. He's a super talented physical quarterback, 6'6", 215 pounds, has a decent, a bit of athleticism and a cannon for an arm. 19-5 touchdown interception ratio last year is pretty good for a 20-year-old quarterback. My guess is that he goes in the 2027 class because this is his first year at UCLA. He's probably going to want to get 2 years more of starting experience under his belt. Former 5-star recruit. I would expect him to be in next year's class. I wouldn't even really worry or factor in that he's in this year's class, to be honest, because of all the guys I've talked about, Nico Iamaleava, I think, is probably the most unlikely to be in this class, but technically he is draft eligible, so I'm going to talk about him a little bit. Carson Beck, I would say, definitely will be in this class because he's going to be 23 entering this year. Fall from grace, 24-6 touchdown to interception ratio and a 90.8 PFF passing grade in 2023. Last year, maybe the fact that he's dating an influencer or whatever got him all fucked up, but the accuracy fell off big time and he turned the ball over a lot more. And he's also a sub 200-yard rushing quarterback, so he is a pocket passer. And Carson Beck, I would say, generally speaking, I would expect the NFL to be higher on Carson Beck than the Dynasty and Devy community because people kind of have given up on him to some degree. But the comps were like Jared Goff-esque entering the 2024 season. We'll see if the transfer to Miami from Georgia can do for him like it did for Cam Ward. Because the one thing that you can say against Georgia, because although it's a good situation, good team, good weapons, and that kind of stuff, they don't really throw the ball a whole lot. So if they let Carson Beck cook and let him throw the ball like crazy at Miami, and he has like a 39 touchdown season like Cam Ward just had in the same situation, then who knows, man? We could be talking about a guy that reestablishes himself as a top quarterback projected in this class. Carson Beck, don't give up on him. Take the value on him in Devy drafts. Maybe buy low on him even potentially, because I do think he can play. And, you know, there was some stuff that were out of his control last year. Avery Johnson is one of my sleepers of this class. Kansas State quarterback, 19 years old last year, and he went 25-10 touchdown interceptions and an 81.1 PFF grade, rushed for 700 yards, 6.3 a tote, and 7 touchdowns. So bit of a dual threat quarterback. He is undersized as hell. He's listed 188. So I don't know what the actual weight looks like, but he's 6'3", 188. And he's got to pack on a little bit more juice than that. For a second-year starter who's going to be 21 on draft night, if he were to come out this year, and again, he could be in the 2027 class too, I think he's underrated. I think he has a chance to have a nice season this year, maybe come out, maybe be a day 2 guy, but he'll probably have to play 2 more years to end up being a first-round quarterback, pack on some weight, get a little bit more physical. We'll have to wait and see what happens with Avery Johnson, but he's one of my favorite sleepers. Late in Devy drafts, somebody that you guys are looking for if you're in really, really deep college football formats. Definitely an interesting guy to go after. Quarterback 12 through quarterback 15, I can speed through these guys here in the waiver wire territory. Again, waiver wire guys, 4-6% that you guys end up hitting on them. Darian Mensah of Duke, formerly of Tulane. Jalen Daniels of Kansas, who's been in the Devy scene for a long time, but is now like a super senior. And Diego Pavia of Purdue. And Rocco Beck, son of former Buccaneer great Anthony Beck of Iowa State. So quickly speeding through these guys, Darian Mensah, you can see some of the comps there, like a Davis Mills type, formerly of Tulane, 21 on draft night, so very young quarterback this past year starting for Tulane. He was a first-year starter at 20 years old, or at 19 years old, sorry, 22-6 touchdown interception ratio, 5.6 big-time throw rate, 9.5 yards per attempt. Decent size, not overly mobile, though. We'll see what happens at Duke in a pro-style offense, because generally NFL teams like when you play in a pro-style scheme like that. But Darian Mensah, an interesting name to think about. Super senior Jalen Daniels, not Jaden Daniels, stay on the friggin' field for starters because he's been injured throughout his college football career. But a career 6% big-time throw rate is really, really high, and 8+ yards per attempts for 3 straight seasons and an 18-4 touchdown interception ratio when he was last healthy is really solid numbers. And 490 rushing yards, 6 touchdowns, also very solid. So Jalen Daniels, don't forget about him. I would say very, very late in a Devy draft, he's a decent shout. Diego Pavia is an older prospect. I believe he's a 6th-year player, but he did have great numbers the last few years at both New Mexico State and at Vandy. His first season in the Power 5 this past year, 85 PFF passing grade and a 20-4 touchdown interception ratio, 898 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns on the ground, 1,058 and 7 touchdowns on the ground his last year at New Mexico State. But they did run the football like crazy at New Mexico State, so they ran him a lot as well. Probably not a super interesting name, but maybe a super, super late guy to keep an eye on, see what he does at Vanderbilt this year. And then Rocco Beck, like I said, son of Buccaneer great Anthony Beck, and not actually a great, but he just played for Tampa Bay. Good numbers, but he had Higgins and Knoll to throw to, so that really helped him. Jaden Higgins, 2nd-round pick, Jalen Knoll, 3rd-round pick. He doesn't have those guys anymore, so we'll have to wait and see what Rocco Beck does this year for Iowa State. 7.9 career yards per attempt, 48 touchdown passes, 17 picks the last 2 seasons as a starter, and 408 on the ground as well, which is not bad. If I had to bet on who actually becomes relevant from this class, it's probably those top 5 guys and then maybe the Mateer, Leavitt, and potentially Carson Beck territory. I would say that these waiver wire guys probably not going to be very relevant to us from a dynasty perspective. And again, if I had to guess who's not in this class, Arch Manning, LaNorris Sellers, Sam Leavitt, Nico Iamaleava, I think they'll be in the 2027 class, if I had to guess. Just based on my own opinion, I have no information on that. I just think that's what's going to happen because they're young quarterbacks, need time to develop. Some of them were 1-year starters. Some of them are entering their first year as a starter in Arch Manning's case. So we'll have to wait and see. I think those guys might be in 2027's class. The race for QB1, in my opinion, will be between Cade Klubnik of Clemson, Drew Allar from Penn State, Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, John Mateer from Washington State, and maybe Carson Beck reemerges from Miami. I think that's going to be the race for quarterback one because a lot of those guys won't be in the class. But this is the 2026 quarterback class as a whole. Again, relatively speaking, I would say a down quarterback class because we don't know of any studs yet, but we'll have to wait and see what happens during the college football season. And this is the class without draft capital. And the reason I like to do this is because we have no friggin' clue what the draft capital is going to be. People want to do mock drafts this time of year. Go nuts. People put names in mock drafts that they know, which means quarterbacks are usually elevated in mock drafts. So do I think that Cade Klubnik's going to go first, Arch Manning's going to go third, Garrett Nussmeier's going to go in the top 10, Drew Allar's going to go in the top 15, LaNorris Sellers is going to go 7th, Fernando Mendonza is going to go 8th. No way we get that many first-round quarterbacks. 0% friggin' chance we get that many first-round quarterbacks. So it's way too far out to project the first-round capital for some of these guys. So this is how they rank without any draft capital inputs. The profiles, just based on their PFF grades, their traits, and their analytics grades: Arch Manning, John Mateer, Sam Leavitt, Drew Allar, Jalen Daniels, surprisingly, Diego Pavia. Again, those guys super seniors, so they're going to be a little bit elevated. Carson Beck, Cade Klubnik, Avery Johnson, LaNorris Sellers. That's how they rank if you remove the element of draft capital in there. And you can see Garrett Nussmeier taking a mad tumble down the board in that case, and same goes for Fernando Mendonza. So those guys probably a little bit overvalued. LaNorris Sellers, I mentioned, a little bit overvalued as well. Even potentially Cade Klubnik, a little bit overvalued. John Mateer, Sam Leavitt, Drew Allar, a little bit undervalued, and same goes for Jalen Daniels and some of those other guys, Carson Beck. So the best comparable class for the 2026 quarterback class, what class would it look like? Best case scenario, it probably looks like 2023s. We get a couple guys emerge, we get a Stroud, we get a Bryce Young, maybe we even get an Anthony Richardson or a Will Levis. Best case scenario, that's probably what it looks like. Worst case scenario, it's probably 2016's class where we have a Jared Goff, a Carson Wentz, a Paxton Lynch. Can't quote me on getting Dak Prescott in this 4th round emerging as a multi-time QB1, but just generally as prospects, the makeup of the class, I would say Jared Goff, Carson Wentz, Paxton Lynch, Dak Prescott is probably what we're looking at as the conservative projection. So now that we've done all the modeling for each position, again, I've done quarterbacks now, I've done running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. Danny and I this weekend are going to hop on a top 24 tier list for 2026, talk about the class, where the tier breaks are, who do we like, who do we not like. Remember, this is a guide. All of these videos are guides. A lot of it's going to change. It's just a roadmap for some historical comps, the types of prospects that these guys are. Frankly, I think John Mateer is way too low. I can't name more than 1, 2, maybe 3 quarterbacks that I would prefer entering into the college football season, just from a fantasy perspective, because he can run the football. Let's focus the crosshairs and give realistic comps for some of these guys, ranges of outcomes for players, and contextualize how good the class is overall. Generally, I would say after doing all these exercises, quarterback is about a 6, 7 out of 10 in terms of the class, because we don't know who's going to be great so far. If Arch is in it, it's probably an 8 out of 10, but 6, 7 out of 10 conservatively right now. Running back class, probably a 7, 8 out of 10. It's the best position in the class, in my opinion, because of what Jeremiah represents up top, Singleton represents up top, those type of guys. Mekhi Hughes up top. I did that video already. Definitely check it out. Wide receiver class has a ceiling to it for sure, but probably a 6 out of 10 wide receiver class based on what we know about the top guys: Jordan Tyson, Eric Singleton, Carnell Tate. Those guys not proven yet, so we'll have to wait and see what happens there. Tight end class, pretty bad at the moment. 4 out of 10, 5 out of 10 at that position group. Like, comment, subscribe if you guys enjoyed this video. All of the prospect data is available for wide receivers, running backs, and tight ends now on the prospect tab of the site. And the quarterback stuff will be up very soon. We're also adding in spider charts so you guys can see what the mock-up looks like right here, where you can kind of get a better visual representation of how good a prospect is based on a number of different metrics. So we're going to be adding that to the prospects tab as well. And if you guys want to sign up now to dominate all of your dynasty leagues, all of your Devy leagues, with rankings, with draft guides, full FSC prospect model data for all 4 prospects positions coming up very soon. And make sure, as always, to use code FSE at sign up for 7 days for free, 30% off any of the packages, 6 months for free when you sign up annually, and a free team review voucher so that me and Danny can break down your team, your dynasty roster live on the channel when we break down dynasty teams. Head on over to flockfantasy.com, use the promo code FSE. Like I said, that'll be linked down below in the pinned comment and the description. Let me know what you guys thought of this video. Took me a long ass time to do it, so hammer the like button if you enjoyed. And I hope I helped you get ahead of your idiot league mates who have no idea who's in next year's class by breaking down over the last month or so everybody who is in next year's class, and some guys even potentially in the 2027 class. So with that being said, peace out, and I'll talk to you soon.